Afraid to go to sleep at night?
Have I ever been this crazy about anything supernatural? No.
There's something on you.
What am I doing?
You bring a medium? If there's a ghost, I don't care.
We are talking Sleep Stalker, and this is a 2025 found footage movie in the style of Paranormal Activity. And the movie focuses on a couple who are influencers, and they're kind of like DIY, home improvement style influencers, and they have bought a new house that is somewhat of a fixer-upper, and so they move into this kind of new house, and the husband, the male, starts sleepwalking and sort of doing weird things when he is asleep. Now, initially, the wife thinks it's kind of funny, and takes some video of him, but then she starts to get a little bit freaked out. So they end up going to this kind of sleep study type place, which installs cameras around the house. And this gets a better idea of what is actually kind of going on. And then even more things start to happen. Things that are not necessarily directly to do with the husband walking around sleepwalking. There's doors opening and closing, things falling over, and even other kind of like paranormal activity. What will happen? You will have to watch the movie and find out. So, let's talk about it. Now, it is very, very similar to Paranormal Activity. Suffice to say, you could even say it's a direct response. What can we say that I liked about this movie? Here's one big thing. I thought the acting was very solid in this film. I totally believed that this couple were a couple, and I totally believed that they were the influencers that they claimed to be. I think it actually starts with quite a good sort of like their channel introduction, sort of, so to speak, and it looks very much like you would see on like platforms like YouTube. And we see a few sort of clips of them talking about various kind of DIY type things, and I think it's believable. The way they've done it, the way they talk, the way she just calls him babe all the time, they have this kind of believable sort of chemistry and way of talking to each other, and just how they're not ghost hunting or anything like that. They are nothing to do with that, but they are influencers, so it gives us a good excuse why they have cameras on all the time. And they almost just try to ignore the kind of the spooky stuff and kind of get on with their sort of DIY stuff. So, it's a good excuse to have these cameras on in the first place. And then you have the added cameras of the sleep study that have put static cameras in each of the rooms to film when the husband is sleepwalking. So again, you've got a good reason why these cameras are always recording. And, like I say, I just think the setup seems quite sort of genuine. The actors seem like real people. They seem like they've got real relationships, and it's a real reason for them to be doing all this and to be feeling like they're feeling. And as the film goes on, as I say, their general feeling of it is kind of, again, a believable journey. Like, they initially just find it quite amusing that what this husband is just doing all this kind of like weird things when he's asleep, and they just kind of laugh it off. But then the wife gets a little bit sort of afraid, and then other things are starting to happen, and the wife is now blaming the husband for doing things that, that he really isn't, because we know that there is some sort of ghost going on and things like that, and he's kind of getting frustrated. So the trajectory of this couple's journey, again, is slower paced, but it is believable, and the supernatural stuff is relatively subtle. So you might think it's somewhat innocuous, things falling over, doors opening. It is stuff that could be sort of explained away necessarily. There isn't anything too overt. There's one scene involving a Ouija board, which is maybe the most probably overt thing in the film. But outside of that, it's you could argue that it's kind of strange, but explainable in sort of some way. So it has this kind of like this groundedness to it that I sort of quite liked. And the movie, and this is going to be a negative as well, but the movie is one of these films that doesn't necessarily give you all the answers. There is some suggestions. We get to the point where, you know, a spirit medium is called in and he kind of gives a sort of suggestion, but he never really goes into a lot of detail. And that might not be anything to it, because he actually gives almost like a alternate sort of, you know, there's a solution maybe, or a kind of a reason giving about the husband, and there's kind of like, oh, there's also something about the house, but we never really know exactly what's actually kind of going on. It's just sort of like one of these things that are ambiguous. And if you were to believe the story, you know, as it presents itself, it's not necessarily going to give you all the answers, but it's clearly hinting at there is some type of supernatural things going on here. Now, if you were a fan of the paranormal activity, like the kind of the static sort of cameras, slow sort of pace to the film, and also not a lot of overt things happening on screen, then again I think you can kind of, there might be a movie like this to enjoy, because this is very much in that vein. It's not a movie where, like another found footage movie like Grave Encounters, that has these big scare moments. It doesn't really do that at all. It's very much a, you know, suggestion, and this, the kind of like the supernatural stuff is kind of quite minor. But like I say, I think it's sold very well. What doesn't work with this movie, I mean, the converse of that is that there's really not a lot actually happening on screen. It's obviously a very low budget movie, and I think the movie is not trying to extend itself past its budget. It is clearly keeping within the budget, and I think it's fine for the movie that it's trying to be and present as. But you might feel, if you're wanting more of a overt things happening on camera, then this might be a film where you feel slightly kind of like disappointed in it, because we really don't get anything actual sort of too overt happening on screen. So there is that. It is maybe a little derivative of the Paranormal Activity franchise, so you know there is that kind of element to it as well. There's one or two things that I think kind of like detract from the believability of a found footage movie. There are a couple of musical swells, which, you know, is good for kind of building up the tension, but a little bit unrealistic in regards to, are we meant to believe this is, you know, actual found footage? That suspension of disbelief. It's probably not going to have musical swells in it. There's a scene where the husband is cutting up which looks like a side of lamb, like a bit of meat from the fridge, and then he gets the kind of like he pours the blood into a glass and pours it on the wife, and there's like way too much blood, and it's like not the kind of like the kind of the plasma or the hemoglobin that's left in when you get a joint of meat. It's proper like thick blood, and that wouldn't be in like you know, that piece of meat. And then the other thing I would say, I mean, they're relatively minor. There are scenes where they go to see this sort of sleep specialist, and the camera is kind of like, you know, it's edited shots between the doctor and them on this kind of like as they speak, and at these points it does not look like found footage. It looks like just a normal movie with edited sorts of sequences, but where whoever's talking in like reaction shots. So that found footage, I think a lot of the hard work that is done to give you a legitimate reason for having these kind of cameras there and a realistic, because they're influencers. Okay, this feels like a genuine sort of like reason to have all this kind of stuff being filmed. But then we have these doctor sequences where that sort of goes out the window because, you know, it looks like a regular film at those points. Again, it's not a major issue necessarily, but it's just a kind of like, you know, again, that suspension of disbelief is somewhat sort of diminished because of that, ultimately. I think overall, though, it's a low-budget film. It's not trying to be anything too extravagant, and I actually think it succeeds for the movie that it's trying to be. But I do feel if you are wanting more of a glitz and sort of spectacle on screen, this isn't that sort of movie. It is a very kind of like lo-fi movie, low-tech movie with not a lot of, you know, extravagance on screen, which may, again, as I say, be maybe a little bit disappointing for some, I suspect. But I've got to say, for the film that we have, and the film that it's trying to be, I actually think it for the most part succeeds. I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Please leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.